February 15, 2026. Lock that date in. Because that's the day the Northwest Premier walked into a Parliament ad hoc committee and didn't say, "I deny it." He said, "Plot." He described an organized political campaign to bring him down. But on the other side of that table, the committee had affidavits, testimony presented on record, and text messages submitted as exhibits. And the allegation they're weighing is explosive, that audit-related documents were tampered with. Quick note, these are allegations and denials in a public parliamentary process. No final finding yet. Now hit like, subscribe. We are not stopping until the report lands on the speaker's desk. Let's rewind. Who is Lazarus Mokgosi? Lazarus Mokgosi is the premier of South Africa's Northwest Province, basically the provincial head, like a governor. And Northwest is not the biggest province or the richest, but it has a reputation. Because this is a province that's been under serious national intervention before, the Section 100 kind, where the national government steps in to take over key functions when governance breaks down. So when Parliament sets up a special committee to look into allegations coming out of Northwest, the context matters. This province doesn't get a "just trust us" pass anymore. The accusation. Here's the trigger. Naledi Local Municipality's mayor, Clifton Groep, took his complaints to Parliament and joint committees. According to reports, he alleged audit reports were manipulated, not misunderstood, not read wrong, manipulated. And witnesses allege there was interference around audit-related processes, which the committee is now weighing. Now stop and think about why that matters. In South Africa, the Auditor General, AGSA, audits municipalities every year. Those audit outcomes shape budgets, oversight, careers, and who gets put under investigation. A clean audit protects people. A bad outcome can end a term. So when allegations say someone could influence that outcome, even on paper, you're not talking about a small admin issue. You're talking about the accountability system itself. To be clear, these are disputed allegations, and no final finding has been made yet. Mokgosi denies wrongdoing, and the committee is now weighing the claims. So what does the committee actually have? According to reports from the proceedings, witnesses came forward and testified. They didn't just make claims, they brought messages, actual digital communications that, according to their testimony, show behind-the-scenes coordination to influence audit processes.
So what is happening, or what we expect to take the center stage when the Premier gives his oral testimony, is the meeting that he attended with other 4 individuals, which include Thabo Apollo. So that meeting was convened at Apollo's residence in Khanyisa, which is 70 kilometers outside Vryburg. So that's where the meeting took place, and where the alleged Osegapo's appointment was discussed by Premier and other 4 individuals who were part of that particular meeting. So what we can tell you from the testimony that we heard from several witnesses that were part of that meeting did not dispute the fact that the meeting did take place, but what is at dispute here is who came with the documents that were discussed, and who said what during that particular meeting. Because one of the witnesses, Thabo Sejake, the second witness, he said the Premier came with a document. That document included a draft report from which was to be submitted to Cogta Department before the MEC makes consideration whether to concur or not to concur with Segapo's appointment. But other witnesses, Aubako Matunzi, Thabo Apollos, as well as Doreen Marie, who were part of that particular meeting, they say the Premier did not come with that particular, did not come with any documents. The person who came with the documents is Thabo Sejake, who at the time was facing some disciplinary issues at work. So he wanted the Segapo gone or not to be appointed as the municipal manager of Naledi Local Municipality. So we are expecting the Premier to respond to those issues when he takes the stand later this morning.
On one side, you have the witnesses and the documentary evidence, messages, communications, corroborating accounts presented to the committee, alongside documents and messages submitted into the record. On the other side, you have Premier Mokgosi. And Mokgosi did not sit quietly. When Mokgosi took his seat before the committee, he didn't just deny the accusations. He went much further than that. He told the committee that what they were looking at was not evidence of his wrongdoing. It was evidence of a coordinated campaign against him. He used a phrase that anyone following South African politics will instantly recognize. He called it a Mokgosi must fall campaign.
I'm at the center of allegation. I must respond to allegations. And the allegations are, one, I've tempered or attempted to temper. That's what this committee is trying to establish. I have misled the MEC at that stage. I've misled the MEC. I've derailed the appointment. And those are the things that I expected to have been said I must respond to. My expectation was I must be told, when did I temper? And how did I temper or attempt to temper? And when did I temper, and temper on what?
Mokgosi, who has concluded his testimony, has maintained that there are people who are involved in a campaign to remove him from his position. Thabiso Mosi, SABC News, Sun City outside Rustenburg.
Sound familiar? That structure, that phrasing, it's deliberate. It echoes previous political moments in the country where the phrase must fall became a rallying cry. By using it, he's framing himself not as the accused, but as the victim. Not as someone who needs to answer questions, but as someone who is being hunted. He questioned the authenticity of the messages presented by witnesses. He questioned the motives of the people testifying. He suggested that the individuals bringing these allegations had their own political agenda and their own reasons to want him gone. And here is where I need you to notice something critical. He didn't just say, "I'm innocent." He said, "They're coming for me."
When the Premier appeared before the ad hoc committee exactly 2 weeks ago, because he appeared on Saturday, the 31st of January, he said that there is an agenda to harm his dignity, also charging that there is a concerted political effort to cast a dark cloud over his head and make his participation in the political sphere impossible. Remember that this comments come at the time when the province is preparing for the provincial conference in May this year, where we are expecting the Premier to challenge the current chairperson of the ANC in the province, Nonomaloyi, for that position. As we have seen over the past few weeks, that there are some posters that are circulating on social media for those people who are supporting him or who are lobbying for him to become the provincial chairperson of the ANC in this province. So we are continuing. We are expecting he's going to put his version to counter those allegations, where he was saying that there is a concerted effort to make his participation in the political sphere impossible. And you'll remember that he also accused the committee of failing to protect him against one of the witnesses who came before this committee, Mudisenyane Sekhapo, the former municipal manager.
There's a difference between those two statements, a big one. When you say, "I'm innocent," you address the evidence directly. You engage with the facts. When you say, "They're coming for me," you redirect. You shift the focus. You make the accusers the story instead of the accusations. I am not telling you which version to believe. I am telling you to notice the technique. Because in politics, how someone defends themselves often reveals more than the defense itself. The messages under scrutiny. Let's talk about those messages. According to reporting on the hearings, specific communications were presented to the committee as exhibits. These messages, according to the witnesses who brought them, suggest coordination to interfere with audit outcomes at the municipal level. Mokgosi challenged them directly. He questioned whether they were real. He questioned whether they were cherry-picked. He questioned whether pulling a single line from a longer conversation distorts the meaning. And honestly, that's a legitimate question to raise. Any investigator will tell you that a message without context can point in any direction. One line can look incriminating when it's actually innocent, or it can look harmless when it's actually devastating. But here's the thing. The committee didn't appear to rely on one single message. According to reports, multiple communications were presented. Multiple witnesses corroborated a similar version of events. The testimony pointed toward a pattern, not an isolated incident. That doesn't mean the allegations are proven, but it does mean they're not easy to wave away either, and the committee seems to know that. The SCA ruling nobody is connecting. Now connect that dot carefully. The SCA ruling is a confirmed legal finding about process failures in an appointment. The audit claims are separate allegations. Put side by side, they raise one question. Is there a broader pattern of process being pushed or bypassed for political ends? That's the question, not a verdict.
This form is gazetted as part of the regulations. It's an annexure to the regulations. Sorry, I'm looking at Malebo. I don't know what I'm looking at. I should be looking at you, Mr. Mwata. Am I correct?
Yes, Chair.
I'm asking you this because the form would make provision for everything in line with the regulations. Do you have the ability to change the form? You, as Mr. Mwata?
No, I can't.
Okay.
Now, connect that dot to the audit manipulation claims. If appointments can be made outside the law, and audit reports can allegedly be manipulated to protect allies or destroy enemies, you're not looking at one isolated act of misconduct. You're looking at a system, a structure where political control overrides institutional process at multiple points. Appointments, audits, oversight. If all of those can be influenced by the same political network, that's not corruption in the traditional sense. That is infrastructure. That's a machine built to maintain control. I'm not saying that's definitively what happened here. I'm saying the evidence, when you lay it side by side, suggests you should be asking that question. I always like to look at the numbers, because numbers don't spin narratives. They just sit there. Naledi Local Municipality operates on a budget that, according to published financial data, sits in the range of a few hundred million rands per year. We're not talking about Johannesburg here, with a metro budget pushing past 70 billion rands. We're not talking about Cape Town or eThekwini. We're talking about a small municipality where a single contract worth 5,000 or 1,000 rands can shift the entire political balance of a town, where one irregular expenditure finding can end a career, and where one clean audit opinion can protect someone for an entire term. In municipalities this size, the audit outcome is not just a report. It is the single most powerful political document that exists. It determines who survives and who gets investigated. So the incentive to control that narrative is enormous. Not because the absolute numbers are staggering by national standards, but because the political stakes relative to the money involved are through the roof. Think about it this way. In a major metro, manipulating one audit finding might get lost in the noise of a 50 billion rand budget. In a municipality like Naledi, manipulating one audit finding can determine who runs the town for the next 5 years. That's the incentive. And when you understand the incentive, you start to understand why someone would allegedly take that kind of risk. The ad hoc committee has closed its testimony phase. All witnesses have been heard. According to reports, the committee is now in its analysis phase. They are compiling findings, weighing evidence, reviewing those messages, cross-referencing testimony, and then they will produce a report. That report goes to the Speaker of Parliament. What happens after that depends entirely on what the committee recommends. They could recommend further investigation. They could recommend disciplinary proceedings. They could recommend referral to law enforcement agencies. Or they could find the evidence insufficient and close the matter entirely. But here's what I want you to sit with. The fact that an ad hoc committee was formed tells you something by itself. Parliament does not create these for minor disputes. They create them when the standard channels are not enough, when the allegations are serious enough to demand a dedicated, focused process with the power to call witnesses and compel testimony. That alone is significant, and it hasn't gotten nearly enough attention. So let me leave you with this. First, if audit reports were manipulated, who authorized it? Because altering an audit outcome is not something a junior official does on their own. It requires access to the process. It requires authority within the system. And it almost certainly requires someone further up the chain either directing it or deliberately looking the other way. So who was that person? Second, is this an inside job within the ANC's own provincial structures? Because here's what makes this story different from the usual opposition versus ruling party drama. Everyone involved, Mokgosi, Groep, the witnesses, they all operate within the same political ecosystem. This is the ruling party turning on itself. And internal wars are always messier, always more personal, and always more dangerous than external ones. Third, what is the committee going to recommend to the Speaker? Because that single recommendation will determine whether this story dies quietly in a filing cabinet or becomes the starting point for something much, much bigger. Something with legal consequences. Something with names attached. If you've made it this far, I need you to do one thing. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you think is really happening in Northwest. Is Mokgosi the target of a political plot, like he says? Or is he the one who should be answering much harder questions right now? Because the committee has the evidence on the table, the Speaker is waiting, and South Africa should be paying very close attention. Like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.